Welcome back to DHN. I'm your host, Wade Teamer. I want to thank you for joining us for this edition. This one is going to be very interesting, especially if you're holding Avalanche. We've started covering Avalanche a few months ago, and I want to say I am very impressed. Shout out to the Avalanche team for putting together such a compelling product. Now, what I want to explain to you in this video is the architecture behind Avalanche. Because as an investor, I feel like we should all understand from a technological side how these assets work. And when it comes to Avalanche, the construction of their network is very interesting. We may be looking at a chain that has solved what they call in the blockchain space, the blockchain trilemma. We'll touch more about that in a second, but let's dive into this. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you where the subnets are being used within the Avalanche network and some pretty interesting players that are getting involved with this subnet architecture. Now, when you're dealing with the Avalanche network, there are essentially three components. You have your main net where everything goes down. In essence, the main net is the layer that you often interact with if you download an Avalanche wallet, you play a game on Avalanche, or you use any of their DeFi protocols. Now, sitting on top of this main net are your subnets as well as the primary network. The primary network has three more components to it, but we're going to focus on the subnets because the primary is a form of a subnet. So you want to understand what a subnet is. Subnets are sovereign networks which have their own rules in regards to memberships and token economics. It is composed of a dynamic subset of Avalanche validators working together to achieve consensus on the state of one or more blockchains. Each blockchain is validated by exactly one subnet. However, a subnet can validate many blockchains. So what that means, in essence, is a subnet is created by distributing the validators that are on the mainnet. So you take a group of validators and they go to create a new subnet. From that subnet, you can build out multiple chains. And when we get to the portion of the video where we go into some of the players that are building out subnets, you'll get a better understanding of that. Now, when it comes to the primary network and the three different chains that run alongside of it, you have the platform chain, also known as P chain, the contract chain, C chain, and the exchange chain, of course known as the X chain. Now, each one of these has their own function, and I love this diagram here. It really puts it into perspective for you. But basically, the X chain is where you'll find Avalanche native assets. So we're going to be talking about one of the biggest titles on Avalanche is Shrapnel. So you can imagine a Shrapnel token. That would be an example of an asset that would run or communicate with the X chain. Now, when it comes to the P chain, this is where you have the management of subnets as well as the creation of subnets. So any activity that's taking place on your subnet, the management side, the protocol consensus level, that will be interacting with the P chain. And then lastly, you have the C chain, which is your smart contracts, EVM communication, things like that. I don't want to get too deep, start bringing up developer languages, because as an investor, you only really need to understand the technical side to a certain extent. Having that foundational knowledge helps you understand how applications are coming to the network or how they're even going to be able to come to the network. That's another reason why I was excited to share this perspective with you guys. Now, another interesting benefit to this architecture is these subnets, thanks to something Avalanche calls warp messaging, these subnets can communicate with each other. So not only does Avalanche allow someone to create their own customized blockchain, which that in and of itself isn't fairly new, but the ability for those created chains to communicate to each other, that's rare. I believe the only other asset with the ability to pull that off would be Cosmos. Funnily enough, when you look at interviews and stuff and talks that Avalanche holds, a lot of developers from Cosmos work on Avalanche. So from that perspective, it's very interesting. And again, understanding this technical architecture of the asset that you're holding of Avalanche, gives you a better understanding of how value is going to come to the chain. So this is an example of the type of information you should look into when you get into any asset. Now that we got the technical stuff out of the way, let's look at where these subnets are being used. Avalanche provides a great dashboard that gives us the ability to dive into this stuff, guys. And you can see here, they have it organized. Primary network is at the top here, CPNX chains. And then you have the subnets listed down here below. Now, it's not a super long list, but we're still early. This just shows you that we're still early. And if you look at the metrics on some of these subnets, yeah, the numbers are not massive, but we're seeing growth. And that's what I like to see, guys. But I want to show you some of the applications that are using these subnets to provide network activity to Avalanche, to bring attention to the chain, to bring value in. If you go over to their core app, which is also the main wallet app for the Avalanche network, I downloaded it myself. It is pretty cool. Very easy to use, very fast. The sign up was super simple. They always ask to make sure that, you record your seed phrase, pass key phrases and things like that. So from a security side, I definitely felt okay. But you can see here the different varieties of subnets that are being created. You have a digital health platform. I saw, Local Legends, India's first NFT marketplace for esports, right? You have Dexalot, decentralized exchange. So these subnets are really being taken advantage of, guys. We've reported on a couple of these developments in the past. Like I know SK Planet. This story here is what really got me involved with Avalanche. I want to say this was about almost 2 years ago when they set that up with SK Planet. But in reading the documentation, guys, on these subnets, I also discovered that for the blockchain gaming space, a subnet is a powerful tool to have. That's why the biggest subnet being used on Avalanche is coming from Shrapnel. And what they're using their subnet for is to create a separate chain that the game can run on. The advantages to that are you're avoiding the congestion from having all your in-game assets, the game itself, running on one single chain. So you can look at it like this. If you're running a game on Ethereum, and the game gets really popular, so that means that more players are getting involved. There's a lot more transactions. Well, that game is going to take up the majority of the network activity. And if it gets really popular on a chain like Ethereum, that can start to get expensive. On Avalanche, with subnets, gaming platforms can avoid that problem. That was an interesting perspective that I got from reading the documentation, and it really made me think, well, if gaming companies really lean into that, Avalanche could be moved out of the enterprise category into the gaming category. Because outside of Shrapnel, you also have DeFi Kingdoms, which is a pretty notable game IP in the space right now. And then you have Merit Circle, who Beam is running a subnet on Avalanche. And this was put in place before Beam and Merit Circle got involved with the Mutable and Polygon. You can see it's all on their marketing here. However, the whole premise behind Merit Circle is to get as many different networks for blockchain games as they can. And with that ZK EVM, it can connect to games on Avalanche, or developers on Avalanche will be able to communicate with what's being built on Polygon. So that's going to be very interesting to watch unfold, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the main reason why I've added Avalanche into the enterprise category is because in 2023, they developed something called evergreen subnets. Now, these evergreen subnets, they're specifically designed the same way, but they're focused at institutional use cases, enterprise use cases, basically to be used by big banks and financial players, right? And they've been rolling ever since. Right now, they have three major players that caught my attention. The first one is Deloitte. Now, this article from 2023, it talks about the introduction of the evergreen subnets, but at the bottom here, they talk about two projects that have already launched. It says Avalanche currently has several EVM-based subnets, including the Intane subnet, which we'll talk about in just a second, which is a tokenized asset-backed security application, and the Deloitte subnet, which is a platform for efficient foreign exchange management act fund disbursements. Now we can go over to Avalanche's dashboard and look at the data for this. This is the Deloitte that you may be familiar with, and they're using the Avalanche network. They're using one of these subnets to build out a close-as-you-go secure cloud-based software platform to help agencies manage recovery documentation for procurement and contracting, model policies and procedures, and plan for disaster. This is disaster relief funds on the blockchain. Very, very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. And then we also have Intane, which they mentioned in the article, but Intane got involved earlier in 2023. But what they're providing is Intane Markets, which is a marketplace for tokenized asset-backed securities using an Avalanche subnet. They aim to meet regulatory and other application-specific requirements as it aims to solve core challenges for a market which created $2 trillion of new mortgage-backed and asset-backed securities in 2022. So in the discussion of tokenized financial markets, Avalanche has been working on these types of products for a couple of years now, which is interesting to see. This is also interesting too. Intane's initial platform, Intane Admin, which now facilitates more than $5.5 billion in assets, they reported that Williamson Trust, a leader provider of wealth and institutional services for M&T Bank Group, would partner with Intane to apply blockchain technology to mortgage bond transactions. Leading trust banks involved in the U.S. securitizations market, WSFS, and UMB already work with Intane to provide paying agent services. So there's the U.S. connection that I've been trying to focus on. Outside of this, there's one more major player, though. And this is the one that officially made me lock in on Avalanche from that day forward. November of last year, JP Morgan test tokenized portfolios with Avalanche blockchain technology alongside other players. You can see they tapped Alexar, Provenance Blockchain, and Oasis Pro for this Project Guardian pilot. You can see they're being used as a permissioned blockchain, which is another key point here. When you're creating subnets on Avalanche, you have that customization capability. You have full customization, which means that you can create separate blockchains that are both permissioned and permissionless, which gives Avalanche more appeal when dealing with enterprise clients. This illustrates that the world the banks see for crypto is an interoperable one. They want to see how these networks, these operating systems, these chains work together. Now, another key point here, Provenance Blockchain. This name has popped up before. And again, it brings us back to those U.S. connections that I'm going to make a point to make about every asset. Provenance Blockchain is tied in with a consortium called USDF. Now, we've covered USDF before, but these are some of the biggest banks in the United States. And they came together last year. And I love how they have this on their page. But they came not last year, but in 2022. Formed a consortium for a stable coin launch. 4 FDI insured banks have joined this consortium. The stable coins are minted on the public Provenance blockchain. So when we dug into this story, guys, we learned that there are a group of US banks that are pushing for a stable coin, a bank issue stable coin, to be active here in the United States. When I started studying the global stablecoin arrangements that were coming down from the hugest players, that's how I discovered this consortium. So all of the stablecoin regulation that we're hearing about in the news right now, just know that it has been planned for quite some time. The stablecoin is the proxy for completely digitizing our relationship with the dollar. So, very interesting rooms that Avalanche likes to be in, guys. Again, just to recap, the point of this video was to give you a better understanding of Avalanche's construction as a chain, as a network. The main net supports the primary network, which in and of itself is a subnet. That subnet can be looked at as the managing subnet for all the subnets that get built on top of the Avalanche mainnet. And then we can see already in just a few years' time what type of applications can be built here. I look at Avalanche as a multi-purpose network, multi-purpose layer 1, and it's because of setups like this. It's because of the architecture. Now, as far as this correlating with price, I mean, Avalanche is one of the top performing assets on the market, and it has been for years, guys. When it first hit the market, I don't know if you guys were here, but everyone was talking about Avalanche. I make a point to avoid things when they're the talk of the town, because then you don't get as good of an understanding of what it actually is. Now that a lot of that excitement has died down, we've gotten to see how Avalanche operates and performs without all that extra energy. If it's able to perform without all that extra attention, then you know it's a good asset. Then you know it's time to dive in, to go full steam. So with that, hope you guys got a good understanding of the Avalanche subnets. If you want to pick up some Avalanche, you guys already know I'm using Uphold. They're one of our channel partners, and you can also not just get crypto on Uphold, but you can invest in gold, silver, and other fiat currencies. And always keep in mind, if you decide to use the link in the description, I will get compensated. So I want to thank you in advance. Also, crypto assets are highly volatile, so please be careful. When you take that risk, get your crypto off the exchange and use a hardware wallet. The one that we're using is the SafePal hardware wallet. Been a channel partner for a few years. Link to that will be down in the description as well. Now it's time for the best part. If that money is digital, so is the hustle.